Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome and thank you so much for joining us today at today's IGF Conversation. For those of you who I haven't met or don't know, I'm Richard Smith. After a full career in the British Army, serving around the world and alongside many of the 25 nations in the Invictus community, I had the great privilege of joining the IGF 6 years ago now, and I'm currently the CEO and Deputy CEO. And I'm delighted to be joining you today as today's moderator for today's conversation. Now, I'm really excited to be part of today's event alongside our partners of Invictus Australia, who are located in Sydney, and along with our Boeing, our global lead partner. Now, as the foundation enters its second decade of being in existence and looks to expand, today is very much about how we, as the enduring custodian in the Invictus Movement, look to nurture and build a vibrant legacy around the world. Now, this is very much work in progress, but a great starting place to look at it is at those host cities and those host nations who've invested so much in hosting the Invictus Games, and to see what they've done and what legacy organizations they've established so that we can learn from them and guide our thinking. And of course, a core aim of the IGF Conversation is to share best practice. Now, at the heart of today's event is our co-host Invictus Australia, the first legacy organization formed after the Games in Sydney and which now provides year-round sports rehabilitation program for veterans and families. We've got a very full and exciting program today with great speakers across 3 panels looking at these key areas of organizations, partnerships, research and program. So to get us started, I'm delighted that I'm about to hand over to our chair, Lord Allen, and he'll be joined with a video from the chair of Invictus Australia, Glenn Keyes, who can't be here today. But without further ado, Charles, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us, and over to you.
Well done, Richard. With that enthusiasm, you've got a job in television or radio ahead of you. Thank you very much for all of you for joining us, and a very, very warm welcome from all of you around the world. I was just checking my watch. It's 7 a.m. in London. It's 6 p.m. So I'm having my coffee. It's 6 p.m. in Australia. And for our friends in Halifax in Canada, it's 2 a.m. in the morning. So really appreciate you being with us for this event. So without further ado, this is our 13th iteration of IGF Conversation. And it's quite remarkable to see what we've covered over so many years. When we launched the webinar, the seminar in 2021, our aim was pretty simple: to bring a global community together to talk about things that were relevant to all of us in terms of whether it's the WIS community or their families, bring people together. And it's amazing when I've been to many games, I've been here 4 years, and people, there's so much in common. People share so many issues that we have in common, particularly families. This iteration marks a significant milestone because it's being hosted by Invictus Australia. And it just shows what can be built, the legacy of the games. The games are amazingly important, but actually it's the legacy that I think is even more important. So basically Invictus Australia was born and created following the games in 2018. And now they do year-round activities, involvement with the WIS community in Australia, throughout Australia, and also hopefully more internationally. It's a testament to our legacy that the Invictus Foundation creates systemic change. Yes, as I said, keep saying, the games are fundamental, but it's the systemic change that, you know, where if we look at the next 10 years, we're going to go where the need is greatest. And we have an amazing couple of weeks here in London. Last night we hosted Ugandan delegation. Last week we hosted the Australian delegation. So this really has become not just games, but a movement, and the movement is really important. I really want to pay tribute to Australia, who really have led the way in terms of creating these hub and spoke, as we talk about. If you look at what's happened in Germany, and I'm delighted we'll talk about it today, to talk about Invictus Germany, because post games they've created a legacy fund, and they're going to be doing a lot more. And they had the first Veterans Day last year, which had never happened in Germany before. And then if we move to Canada, and you'll hear from the Canadian team in terms of what Vancouver Whistler did, in terms of them creating an ongoing legacy for the Wiz community and their family. And that's what's special for me about this. I've been involved in Olympics and Paralympics and whatever for many, many years. But actually, it's the Wiz community and it's their family that makes such a difference. And that's why I'm hopefully you'll get some benefit of talking to people, like-minded people, about where we are today. So where are we going for the next decade? Well, the next decade's, sadly, if we look around the world, Invictus is needed probably more than it was even 4 years ago when I joined, because I had hoped that maybe we wouldn't be needed, but we are. And talking to the Ugandan delegation last night, 5,000 Wiz community in Uganda. How do we do that? How do we do it in Asia? How do we do it? So there'll be global expansion, but also there'll be opportunities for us to do other things between the games, around the games. And I think, if you looked at the Invictus Games Foundation, I would thank everyone who's been a part of the growth. But I particularly want to thank the Australian team, who really have been, as I said earlier, the vanguard of how we take Invictus forward. I also want to recognise Boeing, who've been an amazing supporter and sponsor, and have also sponsored the conversation that we're having today. I'm so grateful for them for their continued support, but also I'd like to thank ATCO, who's come on board, Monster, Better Up, Brigantes, Clifford Chance, American Airlines, for their ongoing support. We couldn't do it without the amazing sponsors and supporters we have. And of course, each of you, as I said, whether it's 2 a.m. in Canada, 6 o'clock maybe with a beer in Australia, 7 o'clock with a coffee in London, thank you so much. And I want to hand over now to Glenn. He couldn't be with us in person, but he wants to say a few. So we're going to hand over to Glenn Keyes, who's the chair of Invictus Australia. He also, I'm so grateful, he agreed to join the Invictus Games Foundation board. Over to Glenn.
Thank you very much, Charles. Hello to everybody from Invictus Australia. We are delighted to be helping to host this iteration of the IGF Conversation today. We were very proud to host the Invictus Games in 2018, which demonstrated to the Australian public, the government, and to our defence and veteran communities the power of sport for the purpose of rehabilitation for servicemen and women. What started as a project of bringing this powerful movement to Australia has turned into an ongoing legacy, which continues to drive the power of sport throughout our community every day. We've certainly learned a lot along the way. While our systems, organisations and approach may be different to other nations, we hope that there are things that we have learned that will assist you in your ongoing efforts to support veterans and their families in your communities. Whether that is developing a formal Invictus program, engaging the community with veterans and their families, or just continuing the momentum through grassroots support. While we've been on this journey for the last 7 years, we know there is still a lot more to be done to support the recovery of veterans and their families through sport, and a lot more that we can learn through other organisations' experience as well. That's why today we are delighted to be sharing this platform with friends and colleagues from other nations across the Invictus movement, who are also undertaking groundbreaking work that is further advancing Invictus beyond what would have been imaginable in the early days. After recently joining the IGF Board of Trustees, I'm also so excited to see the focus of effort for the IGF division extending beyond the Games. I congratulate Charles, Rob as CEO, my fellow trustees, and all of the staff at the IGF for their foresight and desire to take this movement to parts of the world it has not yet reached, and to the global community of veterans and families, and to change their lives and those of all around them. You are soon going to hear from our CEO of Invictus Australia, Michael Hartung, to expand on my message. But I just want to extend an invitation to those of you joining us for the IGF conversation from around the world, for you to reach out to us at Invictus Australia if you feel there is any information that we could share with you to assist you in your efforts to grow the movement. It doesn't matter if you think of something today, tomorrow, next week, or even next year. We at Invictus Australia stand ready to support the global Invictus movement and each of the Invictus country movements around the world. Please just ask. We look forward to helping you. Thank you.
Charles and Glenn, thank you so much. Now, everyone, we are recording this event and we'll share it with you after the event so you can share it with your network, because I think there's going to be huge value. And given, as Charles has mentioned, the very early start we're making for some, please do share it. There's also a chat function available during today's event. So if you wish to ask questions, please pop them in the chat and we'll pick them up as we go and answer them as we go, and certainly towards the end. Now, we're now going to just get ready for our first panel, and our first panel is looking at organizations and frameworks and structures. What happens when the games are finished? So we'll be with you in a couple of minutes while we bring the first panel on. This panel, and I'm really excited to kick off with this panel, as it says, it's really going to look at how do we build the legacy once the games are over, and not only for the games, but as we've discussed beyond the games, how have certain host cities and countries done it and learn from them, and also look at that enduring relationship with us, the IGF, as the governing body, and together look how we can build this legacy, both locally, nationally, and we hope increasingly regionally. Now, as Charles mentioned, in our strategic direction of travel, that last part of developing enduring support for the existing community. And this is really the key part of today, is how do we look after our existing community and those who've invested so much in the Invictus movement by hosting the games. It's very much evolving work as we go. And as we know, each games has its own character. And I suspect that each of the panelists we're going to hear from in a moment will have a slightly different experience. But also, I suspect you're going to pick up some key themes about key stakeholders they need to engage with, but also that overarching desire to engage with the community which they look to serve and support in each of their countries and regions. So without further ado, I'm joined by some great friends, and I'm so pleased to be joined, and I know they'll put me straight very quickly, but thank you. Michael, first of all, Michael Hartung, CEO of Invictus Australia, played a key part in the Games in Sydney and has rich experience with the Paralympic movement. Martin Ammerman, co-chair for the co-project lead for the Games in Düsseldorf in 2023, executive director for D-Live at the heart of those games, and now co-chair of Invictus Germany. And Nick, of course, Nick, you've been with us on our journey throughout 35 years in the charitable sector. You know Invictus inside out. You've been involved in 2 games, and all of you are such great friends. And thank you on behalf of all of us to start with for your support and commitment to the Invictus movement. So without further ado, Michael, could I kick it off with you as our co-host? Could you just give us a bit of a feel of Invictus Australia, how you developed the model as you came out of the games, and what you do for the community and the impact you're looking to have in the community, if that were right, Michael?
Yeah, good evening from Sydney, and good morning to most of the rest of the people joining, particularly those that are in the middle of the night. Great to have everybody joining us, and grateful to be supporting the Invictus Games Foundation with this edition of the conversation. So Invictus Australia, where we came from, as Richard has mentioned, hosting the Games in Sydney in 2018 was a really special time for Australia and for the support and the systems that we put around veterans and their families in this country. It sparked a lot of interest. It sparked a lot of connection. It brought together communities across the country, and they got behind the Games. And coming through that experience, what was really important for the organising committee and for those closely involved was what we do next, because that moment in time being so special needed to then turn into something more. And so through that experience, there was a desire through a series of legacy programs, one of which was the creation of an ongoing sporting program to continue to utilise the values of the Invictus movement throughout the calendar year in communities right around the country. And early stages, we weren't called Invictus Australia. We started life as Veteran Sport Australia. We were announced during the Invictus Games in 2018. And for that first couple of years, we were developing the concept and the model and really working out where our place was in the Australian ecosystem, where the gaps were, where the opportunity was, what was missing, and how we could continue to grow the value of sport for the community. And through our partnership and relationship with the Invictus Games Foundation, we took a leap of faith together in 2021 on the 3-year anniversary of the Invictus Games to launch with Invictus Australia, becoming the first country to create this sort of ongoing Invictus program. And it has been amazing. The type of support that we get from the community, from other organisations, from our partners through government and the private sector is terrific, all harnessed together through that Invictus movement and that Invictus brand. We in the next couple of months will tick over just over 30,000 participants in our programs across the country, which is a significant milestone. That represents nearly 10,000 alone in this last 12-month period, and it was 7,000 the period before that. So we're seeing exponential growth and significant demand for what we're able to do. And as Charles mentioned in the introduction, the value that we bring is entirely systematic. What we look at doing is utilising the existing organisations and structures that exist in Australia. Many would be surprised to know a nation of big geography but of small population has over 70,000 sporting clubs across the country. That means most people in Australia live within 5 kilometres of a sporting organisational group. And it's an opportunity to engage people, both for that recovery and rehabilitation perspective, but also for the preventative values that sport can bring by connecting people with community in a variety of ways. We are critical to our success has been our relationship with government, and I think that will be a reoccurring theme if you ever speak to me or my colleagues about our work. You know, government's been a key strategic partner of ours since day one, and a lot of our achievements, particularly that growth into the community, has been through that partnership. And so they've been critical to our success. And part of that is to do with the fact that we align with a variety of different government strategies and objectives at the moment. Not least, 12 months ago, we had a Royal Commission, which is our highest investigative body into defence and veteran suicide, which turned out 122 recommendations. And through our assessment, there's over 34 recommendations of those 122 that will benefit from the use of sport in how it's responded to. So that's just one example of many where sport is playing a significant role across the sectors and in relation to government. And what's really special at the heart of everything we do is what makes Invictus unique. We're part of a global community. We're connected with nations around the world as part of that games community. We share knowledge and know-how. We're a really attractive, innovative brand. And we're working to support veterans, both current and former serving, and their families, which is fairly unique as well. So it is that unique aspect of Invictus and what it brings to our community here that is the real power behind what we do.
Michael, thank you. Wow, I mean, that's a real tour de force. And we will come back. So I'd like to possibly pick up about your future aspirations regionally. But 30,000 participants, 17,000 clubs. I mean, those are telling things. But Martin, if I may turn to you next, because Martin, you know, as you said, you coming off of the back of Düsseldorf, the amazing games in Düsseldorf, and could you just talk us through how, you know, with Michael, how you set up Invictus Germany, and, you know, a little bit about how you started, but also, you know, your key components in your programs and how you're bringing in the region and everything like that, because it's really powerful. But Martin, welcome, and over to you.
Yes, hello and good morning, everybody. Hello to the Invictus community. Good to see you all. So, interestingly, what we did with the Invictus Games in 23 somehow started in Sydney in 2018, if I got the history right, because it started when the former Minister of Defense, Ursula von der Leyen, now President of the EU Parliament, saw the games in Sydney. So then the decision was made to apply for getting the games or bringing the games to Germany. And the intention was to close the gap or to narrow the gap between military and society in Germany. To bring them closer together. And I think, and Richard, you mentioned that too already, I think the situation and also the purpose to do the games could be different or somehow different, slightly different in every country. And that is also true regarding the legacy of the games, if you ask me. So our intention was, when coming out of the games in 23, was to prolong the purpose of the games, of what we did with the games at 23 in Germany. So we founded then Invictus Germany. And I mean, you mentioned I work for DLive, that is a company owned by the city of Düsseldorf. We are doing nothing else but events, concert shows, and so on. And we did also the event management part of the Invictus Games 23 together with a common team with the German Armed Forces. And our idea was to build that on events that come every 2 years. So one is the Invictus Germany Sports Festival, which we introduced in 24. And the second is the Invictus Germany Awards. That is an award ceremony, which we did first time in this year. So those were the key components. And I can say we were really overwhelmed by the success of both and building up this legacy. But it was not easy. So it's a tough work nonetheless. Again, that might be special in every country. But if you ask me, it's a success story, what we did with Invictus Germany.
Martin, thank you. And before I just turn to Nick, Martin, because you might just touch on your sports festival, you know, because I think your inaugural one in 24, how many nations you had, and next year, how many you're looking to have in June? Because I think it's really telling what you've achieved there.
As I said, we started in 24. And of course, we did not know what will happen. And already in the first year, we had 8 nations in Düsseldorf, 250 participants, and more than 2,000 spectators in our venue. And that was a huge success. And we soon decided to do it in a 2 years rhythm. So the next sports festival will come in June 26. And I can say there's already huge interest internationally. So we're really looking forward if Australia comes with a huge team. There's interest from South Korea, from France. And of course, the German team will be there. And so I think it's going to be a nice event next year.
That ecosystem is just, you know, and reaching out on that global ecosystem is just amazing. Nick, if I could just turn to you, Nick. Nick, you've been involved in 2 iterations of the games. I mean, I don't know quite why I'm sitting here and you're not sitting here and the other way around, but you've been involved in 2 iterations of the games. You know, Toronto and now, just come off out of Vancouver Whistler, just the first Winter Hybrid Games, and an amazing experience. So Canada has invested so much, and TPL, True Patriot Love, into 2 iterations of the games. Could you just, recognizing that and that context, where does legacy sit for you, the Invictus legacy sit for you in Canada, and how best do we take that forward?
Thanks, Richard. You're making me feel old this evening, so I'll endeavour not to keep referring to my 35 years of service in this mission. But legacy goes to the heart of Invictus, and even before Toronto, the very first games back in 2014 in London, which was run by the Royal Foundation, the Duke very much did not want that to be the only games. And so we went into that first games with the intention of creating an ongoing program, which ultimately, through the granting of the IP and the funds left over from London, created the Invictus Games Foundation. So legacy has been at the heart of Invictus from the beginning. But from a Canadian perspective, we're the first nation ever to have the games twice. True Patriot Love as the national foundation here in Canada, which I have the privilege of being chief executive for, is the only organization in the world to have the games twice. And in 2017 in Toronto, I think it's fair to say that the foundation didn't go into that with the specific intention of creating a legacy, but because of good fundraising and a well-run games, it was left with a residual amount of money at the time, about 2.3 million Canadian dollars, which allowed True Patriot Love to make a commitment to Team Canada and Soldier On, who run the team here, to allow them to continue to participate in both the Invictus Games and the Warrior Games going forwards. And that money has been used to allow the Canadians and their families to come to every games since Toronto. And we've already been able to commit beyond Vancouver, Whistler, so they can come to Birmingham and into 2029 with certainty. And that allows Soldier On to plan for a Canadian team and traveling family members for the games going forward. And I hope that's makes their role in selecting the team much more consistent. But from a Vancouver Whistler perspective, what was interesting, was actually building legacy from the outset. And I think I'm right in saying that it's the first games ever to go in with a specific legacy proposal in the bid. And the games has never been about 10 days of sport. It's about the preparation, the inspiration that being part of the games gives to serving members, veterans and their families. And it's about what happens after the games to allow them to continue on that journey. And so when we were creating the bid for Vancouver Whistler, we really wanted to differentiate ourselves from what was a very competitive field. And so in addition to doing the first winter hybrid games, we also thought deeply about the wider social purpose of Invictus. And how do we create ongoing legacy programs that support our serving members' families? How do we create employment and transition programs so those that do have to medically release following illness or injury are able to find a career post-uniform that's just as inspiring? The reason why I'm in Halifax today is we launched an employment seminar yesterday in Atlantic Canada, which was announced back at the Games in February. You may remember the Minister of Veterans Affairs announced funding for a partnership between True Patriot Love and Veterans Affairs Canada. But we also thought about the wider context of the games. We worked to make it the most sustainable games ever. We had a measurable framework for our ESG components, which we actually held ourselves accountable for, and we tracked that using an external consultancy through the games to make sure that we were minimizing our environmental footprint, maximizing our social output, and make sure we were well governed. And in particular, and those who were at the games will remember, we worked very closely with the First Nations. And in the same way that Michael is responding to the recent Royal Commission there in Australia, the National Commission of Inquiry in Canada that had happened just prior to Invictus, looking at the way that the First Nations of Canada have been treated through time, made a series of recommendations, one of which was about organising major sporting events. And so we really embraced that and worked closely with our First Nations partners on the ground, the 4 nations upon whose land the games are taking place, to make sure that we have this shared journey of recovery, recognising that the challenges that our First Nations members and veterans are often in many ways similar. And so we had these 7 legacy programs that we went in with, and then we added those to the fundraising target. And again, one of the things that differentiates True Patriot Love from other bidders is that we're an ongoing organization, and I think that makes a difference. I speak quite often to cities that are thinking of bidding, having been on this journey for a long time, as you gracefully said. And one of the challenges is that people come who aren't from an existing organization. To be able to put the time, the money, the resource behind a bid can be quite difficult. Was True Patriot Love, obviously, as the National Foundation, was able to do that. And so we added the fundraising goal for the legacy up front to the cost of the games as a specific objective, and we broke our goals. So we ended up with about $5.5 million in legacy funds, which we're already utilizing. We've spent a couple of million already during and since the games, and we have about $3.5 million left that we'll invest in those 7 legacy programs going forward. So we've taken a very intentional approach to it, and then tried to think about the different ways that someone on their journey of recovery needs support through year-round sports programming, be it family or be it employment. So we thought about that holistic support to Invictus competitors, not just the 10 days of the games itself.
Brilliant. Nick, thank you so much. Hey, team, listen, just we so many good points coming out here. Just to finish, draw a close to panel 1, if I may, and just aware of the time, I'd just like to ask if, Michael, possibly you could just touch on your thinking about how, you started very much locally, nationally, and just your thoughts about how you're thinking about, Martin touched on it, about how you're thinking about bringing in the region and some of your regional aspirations, because I think that's, again, so powerful. So, Michael, could I just ask you to maybe just touch on very quickly on what you see in the future and how you might bring in the region? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. And this is sort of forming over the past 12 months as we've got to the stage that we are. So through great partnerships that we have with the Australian Defence Force and Department of Veterans Affairs, our government, and all the other community organisations that we work with, sporting organisations, ex-service organisations, we've developed a level of expertise in the way that we operate within this system and environment. And through that, we've started to see a great deal of interest around the region for the work that we're doing, and also from Invictus. And I'm sure we hear that at the Invictus Games Foundation and across the other nations involved. Lots of countries are interested in getting involved. And one way that we can engage is by utilising the expertise that we've developed for other countries in this region who may not necessarily have a pathway to the Games at this point in time, and it may not be the option that they're looking for because of that broad brush approach. So I think, what we really want to look at in 2026, and we're talking with our government here at the moment about that, is about how we can drive these learnings and create a program of effort and support to help our neighbours in the Pacific, in the Indo-Pacific, to generate more support around veterans and the families in their communities through the learnings that we've developed. And then, through that process, we also offer that to other nations where we might be able to assist through our learnings, that we can share those and help others develop what they're doing.
And Michael, thank you. And again, boy, that's really powerful. And again, ties into that strategic direction of travel we mentioned of where there's need, and just reaching out with your ecosystem to bring it. It's just so powerful. Well, what a way to start the conversation. What a way. I mean, there are so many great points that have come out from here. I think what I picked up is the need, legacy and thinking for the future beyond the game should be embedded right from the start, and starting early, thinking early, and getting that thinking about what's going to be beyond the games. When those lights go out from the games, what's there beyond? Because actually, it's so important. We know that competitors themselves go through a bit of a potential dip after the games. So we all need to think about the games at that key point in time. But actually, we need to be thinking beyond. I think, identifying a suitable vehicle to deliver it. Nick, you mentioned TPL and that not-for-profit, Martin, D-Live. It's really important to identify that vehicle. Some of the key stakeholders has come through, I think, loud and clear, that the government, and Martin, for you, I know FMOD, the MOD, Michael and Nick, Veteran Affairs Canada. I think I'm beginning to pick up a growing theme of veterans. A couple of you touched on it's the wounded insect, but also the families, because they're such a key part of this. The really exciting prospects of harnessing regional impact. And then underpinning all of this, which I think as we enter our second decade, is this Invictus community, the ecosystem. You all know each other. We all know each other. We're all talking to each other already and sharing best practice. And it's, those tentacles are reaching out. It's so powerful. So Michael, Martin and Nick, thank you so much for joining us and offering your wisdom and your advice as to what you've done from your cities and nations perspective. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll now just get ready to move on to our second panel, which looks at the value of partnerships. But team, thank you so much. This second panel, the value of partnerships, will showcase how partnerships are at the heart of the Invictus movement and how they go far beyond just the games themselves. And it's through long-term partnerships that we're able to impact on individuals as well as create lasting change. And we're delighted in this second panel to showcase the role of Boeing as a key and long-term partner for us and our lead global partner, and to highlight some pointers for the future as we continue to evolve. So I'm delighted to be joined today by, we were hoping to be joined by Simon O'Brien, but I don't think Simon's been able to join us today. So we're delighted to be joined by Amy List, Managing Director of Boeing Defence Australia. Amy was an engineer in the Royal Australian Air Force and has been Managing Director for over a year and with Boeing since 2018. Amy, welcome. And Amy, if I may, in a moment, I'm going to sort of just start with you and ask if you could give the overall arching strategic overview from Boeing, as well as then narrow into Invictus Australia and how your sort of partnership with Australia, if that would be all right, Amy. Vanessa Bernardo, Director, Strategic Partnerships and Brand, Invictus Australia. Vanessa, you've been with Invictus Australia for 5 years, and I know that your role has sort of changed and grown over the last 18 months to manage all corporate partnerships for the organisation. So, Vanessa, welcome. And Adam is joining us. Adam Jackson took part, I think, Adam, in Vancouver Whistler,
yes,
in the games in Vancouver. Adam, you spent 15 years in the Australian Army and nearly 4 years recovering from recovery and rehabilitation before applying for the Invictus Games in the Invictus program.
Yep.
And I think, Adam, not only the games, but you've seen firsthand the impact of Invictus Australia's programs and programming, and they've been the building block for you on your continuing journey of recovery and rehabilitation. So in this panel, with that, what we're hoping to do is just see the impact that a partnership can bring, and partnerships, but really focusing on this stage in this case in Boeing, but just in this framework we're building, the value of partnerships and what they can bring. So Amy, could I start with you? And Amy, welcome. And Amy, could I ask two questions? Two questions for you, if I may. Could I ask you just touch on, Boeing have been such an amazing partner for us. You've been presenting partner for 2 games, and you've been such a long-term supporter of Invictus. And I say Invictus because it's the games, but it's not just the games. It's our lead global partner. So could you just first of all touch on what, why this partnership with Invictus is so important to Boeing and what it means to Boeing and what it brings to Boeing from the strategic level? And then if we could, the second part of it is, but if we do that and then and then perhaps look at, many people may not know your relationship and your activating in Australia and why going from that global strategic thing, actually providing that support into Australia is so important as well. So, Amy, sorry, if that would be all right, a couple of questions there, but I hope they made sense. And if I could hand over to you, and welcome.
Thank you very much, and I'll give that a go. Really appreciate the opportunity to come here today and talk to you all about Invictus. We are thrilled to be the lead global partner. It's a cause that is near and dear to my heart and to the Boeing company's heart. So look, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us in the world today. It's great to be with you. Boeing's partnership with Invictus started right here in Australia in 2018 with the Sydney Invictus Games, and I was there, and I still remember the energy and the passion and that spirit of Invictus that united everybody that was there. It was my first connection with Invictus, and I was truly inspired. So I'm really proud to be representing Boeing and the work that we're doing globally with Invictus. Just a few points on what we're doing globally, and then I'll try to narrow down to some more local engagements. But look, Boeing has a really large veteran employment population right across the globe. Within Australia, I've got, particularly Boeing Defence Australia, we've got at least 1,000 veterans. And so we see firsthand how the connection with community, how the connection with sport, competition, teamwork, all of those Invictus values is just so important to ensuring that we have veterans who are strong and connected and doing all that they can post their service time. We signed last year, we signed an MOU with the Polish Veterans Centre. So there's things that we're doing right across the globe there to make sure that we're really connecting in with as many veteran organisations as we can. Likewise, Dusseldorf a couple of years ago was a brilliant event. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to Whistler more recently. But Boeing and our employees just get so much pleasure out of really contributing to the community and seeing how the spirit of Invictus, what the games can do, brings to that veteran community. Let me pull it down to a more local level and hopefully answer the second part of your question there. I'm happy to touch back on that first part if I didn't answer it fully. Within Australia, one of the things I'm really excited about is how that connection with Invictus supports a lot of that grassroots community activity. So look, I know a lot of the spotlight goes on the games and the events that happen there, but the veteran wellbeing centres that are funded, even just things like up in Townsville for our non-Australian listeners, it's a town in the north of Australia where there's a strong army presence, and our workforce up there spent time at the Invictus Australia Defence Community Expo, doing a whole range of activities with kids and those families of veterans, which is so important to keep them inspired and connected. I see firsthand how my team enjoy, and they get a lift from contributing. And then we get to hear the stories from the veterans themselves about how the work that happens within Invictus, the drive to compete, the personal satisfaction that comes with the achievement of sport and the teammate and the camaraderie, how that really lifts them and helps them in their post-service life. I'm really proud to say that Boeing in 2024 contributed over $15 million to veterans causes globally. So we support many veterans causes because it's really something that not only is dear to our hearts, but benefits our workforce as well when they can see us leaning into the community. I might leave it there. I'm sure you've got questions and I'd love to follow up on any of the points that I've thrown out.
Amy, thank you so much. And Amy, I think what just struck me there is, Boeing, and it's that alignment of values, which I think is really, with the partnership is just so important. Your emphasis and your clear support and commitment to veterans. And, I just remember just how powerful that strapline was in Dusseldorf for enabling a home for respect, of which Boeing was the presenting partner. That still resonates so widely within the Invictus community, this global community. One of the core common values is respect. So what you brought as that partner and that alignment of values is just so It's just so important. And Vanessa, if I thank you, Amy, and we will come back. Vanessa, if I could just turn to you now, and just looking at it from Invictus Australia's perspective, can I just ask you to just give us a bit of a feel of what what the Boeing partnership has meant for you, for Invictus Australia, and how you've sort of created real impact on the ground with it. That would be great. So Vanessa, if I could turn to you, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Thanks, Richard. And thanks, Amy. It was lovely to hear you explain that so articulately. And a few times on the call today, we've heard that we're friends and we all care deeply about the cause. And I think that really comes across, and working locally with Boeing here in Australia to support our community work has really seen that come to the fore. So Michael touched on the Australian landscape earlier, but with almost 600,000 veterans in Australia plus their families, the impact that we can have in the community is really only enhanced when we have local corporate partners that care deeply about what we're doing on the ground. And what we've really enjoyed with Boeing is looking at those veteran and family hubs that Amy mentioned, and looking at really practical ways that we can bring sporting activities to those places and communities to help build social connection, mental and physical well-being as well. We can't reach that sort of audience without partners like Boeing. And getting to know the Australian team here, looking at tailored responses to the need here really takes a powerful global partnership and engagement and support moment into the communities. And I think that's what we, likewise, Amy, really enjoy here. Our local team of veteran engagement managers that are based around the nation, we've got 8 of them currently, and they're all veterans or family members themselves. They know all of the Boeing staff in the local regions. So they attend those days in Townsville and Nowra and Newcastle, again, all regional or cities around the country that have veteran and defence populations there. So it becomes, the partnership really becomes more than words on a page. It really is brought to life, and also with the large veteran workforce within Boeing, it allows Boeing staff to come along and also reap the benefits while being involved in something that's really making a difference. And we see it through the stories that we hear, and I'm really excited to hear from Adam in a moment too, because for us, the Games is a wonderful opportunity to support the wounded, injured, ill community. But here in Australia and also around the world, we've got other audiences that the community work supports. It's those veterans that apply for a Games and can't attend. The community work, again, that's supported in these areas and through programs like this allow us to offer them another opportunity for all veterans and family members that are looking to connect. So from a really practical perspective with Boeing, we've been able to remove barriers to allow veterans and families to get involved in more sporting opportunities. And it's been really practical things like providing equipment like pickleball bats and yoga. And we've got a really beautiful story of a spouse of a veteran who got into yoga herself at one of the veteran hubs through one of these programs, attended a few times, and then dragged her veteran partner along who was feeling socially isolated. And now they do this yoga through the veteran hub locally, and it's enhanced the well-being not only of each of them individually, but their connection back into society. And so it's a really practical way that the partnership with Boeing and the work we're doing at a grassroots level can really change and save lives. So I think Boeing's a fantastic benchmark of how we can take that global movement and really make a difference in communities.
Vanessa, thank you. Well, stand by, Adam. Coming to you in a minute.
You're right.
Stand by. But no, Vanessa, thank you. And just pulling all these messages together. Vanessa and Amy, you've just spoken so powerfully about the alignment and really understanding each other's common values. But also, Vanessa, you just picked up there again what Michael said in the first panel, understanding the requirements of the community you're serving. I think is really important. It's really, and we're going to come back to that in panel 3 as well, being really clear on what the requirement is and focusing the requirement, because otherwise our effort could just be dispersed and diluted, but really understanding the community we're serving, and we're about to go to Adam in a moment, to really understanding that, I think is so important. And again, as you just touched on there, removing barriers, another key idea, and also families. So thank you so much for that. Adam,
yes.
Turning to you now, because I can keep talking, but actually it's all about it's about you, and we're all here in the Invictus Movement to support people like you and the lived experience, because that's what we're all about, is helping people like you pick up on sort of your recovery and rehabilitation. So Adam, I was going to start with first question first, because that's why we're all here. But there's another question coming, and then I've got another one for everyone after that. But first of all, could you just talk us through your journey? Give us a little bit of background, Adam, to your journey, and then we'll come back to, the impact that Invictus Australia has had for you. And just tell us a little bit about yourself, could you?
Yeah, so I served in the Army for nearly 15 years, 12 years full-time, 3 years part-time. In 2020, I had a stroke at home, which totally paralyzed me down my right-hand side. And through, the support of my family, I slowly got better, got some function back. I still have a non-functional right hand. But basically, my journey started in 2020, coming into, say, I think it was 2023, so 3 years after that, after my wife's nagging, and because she could see, and I suppose this goes to a lot of friends and family, or the support that you get from your family, is that they can see what you can do where you can't see that. So they're there to support you, and my wife was a classic example of that, where she sort of giving me hints, you should apply for this, I think you'd be really good at this, and she just kept going until I applied. It was an awesome journey for me. The Invictus Games, it's just that connection to other competitors, to your teammates, to friends and families from other countries as well. Like it's just that whole effort leading into that. It just fills you up with confidence. It fills your bucket, I suppose you could say. And for me, it gave me that competitive edge and spirit back. And I've carried that on through other events after the Invictus Games.
Yeah, Adam, can I just pick up on that? And
yes.
Because that's really powerful. And then could you just touch on this beyond the games bit? What would be your advice to, or what's the beyond the games? What's the power of the activities which Invictus Australia and the programs are offering in the community? And could you just talk a little bit about those and what you'd be saying to your sort of peers and colleagues?
Absolutely. Leading up to the games, Invictus Australia have done an awesome job with how they, mentor the athletes. They give you the tools to succeed, and whatever that looks like for you. But they also give you the tools to cope after the games. This is what's going to happen to you after the games. So in that respect, Invictus Australia is looking after you after the games. And for me, for Invictus Australia, there's so many programs out there. There's indoor rowing, hubs. There's parkrun. Parkrun is held across the world. And Invictus Australia is partnered with Parkrun Australia. So you can go out and you can do parkruns. There's sailing, there's surfing, there's like Vanessa said, there's the like family days. There's all these things that you can do out there. It's just my advice is you have to actually, I suppose, get up and actually attend these events. I know it's I remember having a lot of conversations with my wife before I applied for Invictus, because failure's hard, but you have to look for that support, whether that be through your family, your friends, like former athletes. Like I'm still friends with most of my teammates. We talk at least once a week with one of my teammates. It's because they're doing kicking goals. Doug Griffiths is going to do a 100-kilometre run at Cozzy. Dave Milne, he's hopefully going to go to the Paralympics next year. Like, there's all these success stories, but for me, you can't look at that and go, well, I'm not that good, and not try. There's other things that you can do to get into the sports. Whatever the sport you choose, you got to get out there and do it. I think is the most important message. And there's other people there to support you, but you have to reach out to them. Whether that be former teammates, you're having a hard time and you just want to reach out to someone and say, hey, look, can I have a chat? Or so you've got to actually, start that process. And sport is a wonderful tool for recovery and rehabilitation, especially with family. For my girls and my wife, seeing where I came from to where I am now, it's inspiring for them. But I want to be that role model for them. So for me, that's part of this journey. It's not about me per se and what I did at Invictus. It's what I do after the Invictus Games, and can I inspire other people to pick up the mantle and carry on this legacy of Invictus.
Adam, thank you. I mean, Adam, that's so powerfully spoken, and some of your the message you're saying there, and it's about that community helping each other and getting out and doing it and taking people with you. It's really what we do, helped by Invictus Australia and Boeing. And team, thank you. I'm just going to draw this panel to a close, but Vanessa, before I do, can I just ask you very, very quickly, just to give us your thoughts, and your role is leading partnerships for Invictus Australia. How do you think Australia can work with IGF going forward in growing partnerships globally? Could I, as we look to the future and as they guide our thinking, which is one of the key themes I said up front, but sorry, it's not fair, Vanessa, but very quickly, could you just give us your quick thoughts on that? So forgive me.
Yeah, of course, Richard. I think what's wonderful is the fact that we are growing and evolving, and certainly in the last year or two, we're starting to look at where there's crossover globally, and then in the strongholds or where these other Invictus hubs are. I think there's immense opportunity. I think Boeing's a leading example of how we can take a global moment and really take it into a movement and change and save lives in local communities. So I think we've got some really good examples. I think we've got fantastic relationship with the Invictus Games Foundation and our current partners here in Australia as well, always looking at how we can support up and across and make a bigger footprint and impact, because the more we can do together, the more veterans and families we can support, the more that Invictus spirit can truly transform lives, and we can transcend this one fantastic idea that started back in 2014 and have that sustainable long-term impact that changes real people's lives, like Adam and others in the community. So yes, encourage everybody to get involved, and as Glenn said at the start, please reach out to all of us. But I think the IGF, Invictus Australia and others in the hubs are really going to cement what these partnerships look like moving forward. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you, Vanessa. That's brilliant. Thank you, Amy, Vanessa and Adam. Thank you so much. I mean, that has just really, reinforced some of the messages from panel one so well and so beautifully. But it's that, having the framework and the structures, but then having those partners, and I think, Vanessa, you said friends in the way that alignment, understanding each other, and being really passionate about what we do, because doing that and then having the impact on the ground, which we heard so wonderfully narrated by Adam, who we're all here to support those individuals and their families. And Adam, you know the impact on your family and your wife as well. So it is that whole family unit we're looking to support and reach out to. And then those pointers to the future of what, as we build, as we said, it's evolving work, and we're really excited about going on this journey as we enter our second decade. But team, thank you so much for joining us and for giving us your wisdom and advice, and to Boeing, Amy, as our lead global partner, thank you. You're pointing the way, and thank you so much for everybody. And now we're just going to prepare for our third panel and final panel, which is on research, and we're going to hear from a variety of international perspectives on the value of evidence-based research to drive change and impact. So thank you very much, and we'll just take a few seconds now as we reset for panel 3. But thank you. Now for this third and final panel, which again, really excited about. We often talk about the power of sport, and it's one thing to see it and feel it. However, it's another thing to back it up with clear, focused research and evidence, which is capable of attracting funding and then delivering meaningful impact on the ground. We've done some great work already to show the impact of the Invictus Games on individuals and nations. But the impact of the power of sport is demonstrated in many other ways. And of course, it's not just the games, it's a constant theme, it's beyond the games. And that's why today, as we look at research and the power of evidence and research, I'm so pleased to be joined by a global panel of experts. Firstly, Neil Bergin, Director of Strategy and Research at Invictus Australia. Dr. John Main, Chief Psychiatrist for the Department of Veterans Affairs, Australia, and a former coach, archery, I think, John, wasn't it, for Team Invictus Australia, which is great. Dr. Selina Shirazipur, Selina, hi, our IGF research consultant and assistant professor at the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Selina, welcome, and it's great, really great to see you. And Dr. Nicholas Held, the interim scientific director of the Canadian Institute for Military and Veteran Health Research. With your expertise, are really going to add some further value to this conversation. And again, just show another thing of how we can, and the key one on this, I think, is how we can really deliver impact and make a difference to change, make a change to policy and programs and drive impact. So Neil, if I may, could I start with you as the Director of Strategy and Research at Invictus Australia? Neil, with your Invictus Australia lens on, could you just summarise some of the research that you're conducting and the impact it's having on what it's being able to drive and do in your nation? Neil, would that be right to start with you on that one?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Look, Invictus Australia, we're not really in the business of conducting that much research. I think our role is really around the consolidation and translation of research. And what we recognised, I think last year, we were looking at impact, as you said, and we wanted to understand how we could shift the dial around influencing policy, strategy, and decision-making across government in Australia and of course the Australian Defence Force as well. We wanted to really understand how we could start to address some of the challenges highlighted by the Royal Commission, which was the final report was last year. Now, we've heard some really powerful stories from Adam today, and there are lots of those, and those stories are incredibly, powerful and useful to engage with government, but they're not enough. And so what we realised was that the evidence base was critical to add extra weight and credibility to those stories as well. So here's the anecdotal stuff we can tell you about the benefit of the games, the benefit of sport and all of those things. But look, here's a whole heap of research which demonstrates it and gives us the proof that the participation in sport for members of the defence community and their families has many, many upstream benefits, which aren't just physical or mental. They talk to a number of areas. So the first stage that we undertook was a global literature review. We wanted to, collate or consolidate all the research that we could find, which promoted the role and benefit of sport for the defence community. And it became, a really fantastic project. We took on some support from a local academic who's still connected with us now, Dr. Miranda van Hoof, and she put together a literature review which put all this research in one place. Now, what that helped us to do is when you take that literature review and you map it against government priorities, we're able to demonstrate to government exactly, when you theme out the research areas, how sport can contribute towards government priorities. That's really helpful when you can start to engage government on a whole new level around, look, here's sport and here's how it can actually begin to address national priorities. On top of that, we looked at some economic impact modelling, and we're able to demonstrate, although domestically in Australia, it's probably translatable in other nations as well, is the upstream cost savings if members of the defence community can be engaged in sport as part of the transition process or even throughout their service, the upstream savings in mental health costs. So again, when you talk to government about savings, that's a really powerful message, and again can help us to shift that dial around engagement. I think that the next stage for us and people on the panel today with me, a part of this journey, is it's this translation piece. So we've got the stories, we've got the evidence, but so what? What's that translation? What does it mean? And more importantly, what does it mean to the different audiences that we engage with? So the evidence and the sport, it will mean something different to government. It will mean something different to defence, but also to sport as well, because sport isn't necessarily engaged with the veteran community the way we would like it to, because they don't see the value of engaging with sport. And that's where the evidence base comes in as well. It's a two-way thing. It's to connect veterans with sport and to connect sport with veterans. And so I think that's the whole role for us now. Consolidate the research, keep on bringing it together through connecting the knowledge communities, and then use that evidence base to translate what it means to those various audiences, and then use that to shift the dial around government policy, strategy and decision making.
Neil, thank you so much. Again, a really good starter for this panel, and you sort of just mentioned a couple of concepts there. Anecdotal is powerful, but it's not enough. And I think I really took that. And I think the other thing is, know your audience as well. Know what's going to drive your audience. And now I'm just sort of going to just move on to you, John, if I may, John, because I'm sure you're going to pick up and build on some of those themes. Now, John, you've been to an Invictus Games as a coach. You've seen the power of sport firsthand. Could you provide some context around where you think the value of research is, noting that Australia's just had this Royal Commission into the suicide of veterans, which Michael's and a number of speakers have mentioned, and serving personnel. And could you just, from your perspective, just give your view? What do you see and know of the power of sport and research, and how research can best be used to change outcomes?
There's a couple of really fundamentally important things here. And the first one is that there's this old line about, decision-based evidence making. And what we mean by that is, some government department goes, oh, this would be a great idea, and quick, someone find me some evidence to back up that particular decision. But, the world shouldn't work like that. And good policy and good practice definitely doesn't work like that. And this is what we mean by evidence-based decision-making. And so, I can talk about myself as, the archery coach for the 2018 and the 2022 team. And, what I saw, the athletes that I was looking after, how they changed, how they grew, how they dealt with a whole bunch of different issues. But as was mentioned before, that's anecdotal evidence, and so it becomes really, really important when there is actually a body of evidence that says there are a multitude of benefits across a multitude of domains within a range of different disciplines of sport for people. And this, the reason this does become important is because you can point to this body of work which says these are the likely potential outcomes if you fund and if you encourage and if you support sport in these particular ways. And speaking as a clinician, as a psychiatrist, sport, adaptive sport and engagement are so fundamentally important to not just recovery, but actual ongoing well-being as well too. You know, and heard in the previous panel, athletes talking about the fact that you actually have to get up and do things for yourself, because when you start participating in adaptive sports, you're then engaged in a community. When you're engaged in a community, you have a whole bunch of other social relationships going on. When you're engaged in a sporting activity, all of a sudden you start to develop a routine. When you have a routine and you're doing something, you have a sense of purpose because you're doing it for a reason. Yeah, that motivation, all of those sorts of things become multiplicative. It's not just this and that and whatever else, because diet cleans up, new social relationships form, new forms of support form. You know, things that you might have been upset about or distressed about don't become anywhere near as important. And then emotional resilience and emotional regulation skills improve and develop. And so the well-being of the individual develops as well too. And so as a psychiatrist, I can't put any of this stuff in a pill and prescribe it to someone. You know, like literally cannot give this to someone as a pill and go, here, go take this and, you know, everything will be better. But as a clinician, as a part of, you know, as the chief psychiatrist for the Department of Veterans Affairs, we can support these kinds of things because we know that there is strong evidence now that there are a whole huge range of benefits for well-being, for personal growth and development, and so on and so on and so on. You know, and the cruel sort of callous, you know, bureaucrat might say, well, it's actually a good thing also because people cost a lot less, you know, and you can actually point that out with appropriate evidence and things as well too. And so when you have that body of work, you can point to all of these different sorts of things and you can go tick, 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 tick. And then funnily enough, people are like, yeah, great. We'd love to give you money. We'd love to help. How can we help? What can we do? You know, you don't have that though. You know, as the saying goes, you're shit out of luck.
Again, just building on Neil's comments as well, is just really powerful. Selena, could I sort of turn to you next? And Selena, noting that you're the author of the IGF's Beyond the Finish Line report, a 5-year longitudinal study looking into the long-term benefits of Invictus Games programming across our Invictus and wounded, injured and sick community. I'm really interested in the outcomes of the report, if you could, and how some of the outcomes could be used to put in practice to drive societal change. And so could you just pick up on that and also the best practice, given that we're about, you know, the conversations about sharing best practice, and as John has said, and how nations can learn from each other. So could you start with that, Sonia, and just give a bit of a sort of a summary of, you know, the key things emanating from your report?
Sounds great, and thank you so much for the opportunity to join. With our report, which was funded by Forces of Mind Trust, we really aimed to do 2 things. The first was to demonstrate the impact of sport through the Invictus Games. But the second piece, which relates to our conversation today, was very much how do we achieve that? So we're seeing a benefit, but how can that be implemented by each nation? And so we ended up developing through an iterative process and surveys and interviews across all the nations, a list of 71 best practice strategies. Now, these aren't meant to be a checklist. They're meant to be a resource that different nations can turn to if they're trying to work on different components, and in particular to support new nations as they join the games and are trying to support the development of their coaches and nation staff. I think of interest to what we've been discussing, there were 2 really key organizing ideas around the strategies. The first was this concept of an individualized development plan. So this idea that we're here to train for the games, but our discussion is going to be around how are you going to use this for the day, for the week, for the month, for the year after the games, which I think links into what's already been said in this panel. So it's having a discussion even prior to selection about how are we going to spend time, what resources do you need, how is this going to be a catalyst for how you're going to move forward after the games. And what we really see is sport which is so important in terms of physical activity and physical and mental health. But sport can really be that excuse and that opportunity to bring people together to work on these larger skill sets around growth and resilience. The second central point that we saw was the importance of the attitudes of coaches and nation staff, particularly around this idea of transformational leadership. So viewing the individual, the competitor, as a person, that they have had experiences prior to coming into this, that they're a member of a family, of a larger social network, and how can we motivate and support the individual to achieve their potential through community building and through a shared purpose. So how can the games and then these beyond the games activities be a springboard to a long-term pathway of recovery, and having that conversation of not just the games, but the beyond the games. And so we really saw a lot of nations dealing with these questions of how to support community among those not selected, among those selected. And it really comes to this idea of the beyond the games activities, the Invictus Games giving energy and catalyzing community, but beyond the games being the opportunity for everyone to achieve milestones, for those who can't compete in the games or who aren't selected to build an Invictus identity, be part of the community, and for those who have participated in the games to continue towards that long-term recovery.
Selena, I think you picked up on a couple of really important things there about, not only the games, but also the power of the beyond the games, and that they can provide the milestones in the same way in these. I think you've mentioned again community, and also just looking after those who aren't selected as well. I mean, I think that's really important, because with only 550 competitors going to the games, what are we doing to look after them who aren't selected, and indeed those after the games who have been, so they're part of this community, and it becomes building momentum. So as Adam sort of says, they grab each other off the sofa and go and take part in these activities and the opportunities. And what we increasingly want to do in the Invictus Games Foundation is encourage nations to put on these activities themselves, to sponsor, to invest in these activities themselves, locally and nationally, and we'll support it, but actually to grab these, be it parkrun, whatever, and build an Invictus theme into all of those. So again, it's that ecosystem at work. And Nick, if I may just turning to you, just be interesting if you could, Nick, just offer your perspective from Simvar and the Canadian perspective, and just tell us about some of the work you're doing in Simvar and some of the key outcomes. And also you might just touch on, the work which is you're building out of the Vancouver Games with Vancouver Whistler Games as well. So Nick, over to you if I may.
Fantastic, Richard. Absolutely. And thank you very much for having me today. For the Vancouver Whistler 2025 Games, we were lucky to partner with True Patriot Love to launch 2 research projects. One of those was a rapid review that looked at current literature, both within the Invictus Games and outside the Invictus Games, including winter adaptive sport, that looked at participant experiences and the drivers and barriers to participating in adaptive sport at large. And we used this information where we saw a lot of the things that Selena has brought up and a lot of the work that we've talked about throughout today, to lead into a larger study, which was a multi-nation study that's currently underway right now. So we do have some preliminary findings to talk about, but some of the key pieces that were brought into this were because of the previous research that has been done in the field that we've heard about. So we had a biopsychosocial approach, which we have biometric measures, we have in-depth interviews, and we have surveys. This lasts both before the games, during the games, or immediately post, and then at different time points for a 1-year follow-up from the games. And part of this ties into what we've heard as well, but also what we heard Nick say, where it's not about the 10 days of the games, it's about the pieces afterwards. And what we wanted to make sure is that we weren't capturing immediately after the games where people might have a really great experience and they might be very excited and everything went very well. We wanted to make sure we captured that and we compared that to 6 months, 9 months, and 1 year later to see what the impact of the games was within Canada. And the last thing is that we also included individuals that were selected and those who were not selected to the games. This is an area that I think is critically important, as we talked about, to continue going on. I can say within the sample size, you typically ended up recruiting more people who were participating in the games than those who were not selected. So that's going to continue to be an area of further examination. And we've had the opportunity to learn from Invictus Australia today and the team in Dusseldorf, where you see the impact of the games and where it has taken them. And this is something where we're hoping that the findings from this research can help build a little bit more of that Canadian landscape. So we've heard preliminary findings, this sense of camaraderie, this idea of bringing people together with a common purpose and a common mission that really helped with their recovery. One of the biggest barriers, it seems to be, is this post games and the infrastructure, depending on the countries they're coming from, to continue engaging within adaptive sport. So I think this information, they've highlighted some key points that would allow us to continue building something in Canada. And I can highlight from my own previous research in exercise and the impact of exercise on rehabilitation and chronic pain management. It doesn't have to always be the Invictus Games, a large sporting event. There's opportunities that we can do between the games that create that sense of purpose, that drive, that ability to accomplish something and be a part of a team that is so important. One of the other things I really wanted to highlight too that we're doing at Simver is we do have a special issue on adaptive sport that's coming out in June of 2027, right ahead of the Birmingham Games. And Selena, I can say, is one of the guest editors, and Martin Colclaws as well. And we're really excited to have them on board. And this was not lucky timing to come out in June of 2027, but intentional, so that there is a body of work where we can convene work that's happened within the 2025 games and for the next couple of years leading up to Birmingham, where it all can be in one place. Call for abstracts are now open. This is free to publish and it's open access. So hopefully that creates a launching point for us to be able to convene some of this research that's happening and put it all in one place.
Team, thank you, Neil. I'm just going to touch back to you as our co-host for today with Invictus Australia, because you started us off with John and just perhaps the two of you, but we've got a couple of minutes. Could you, just highlighting what you said, could you point to something you sort of talk about? You both talking about evidence and then evidence-based, really thinking through the requirements, knowing your audience to get funding to drive impact. But could you just leave us with an example where actually evidence, the research and the evidence has really driven change in what you're seeing from Invictus Australia and in Australia?
So that summary report is probably the first time that there's been the collection together of a whole range of different sorts of evidence about the different sorts of benefits that you can get from not just participation in sport, but in particular participation in structured physical activities, sports, that Invictus not just promotes, but actually actively supports. And the reason this becomes important is because if you don't have this body of work in one particular document, what you have to do is you have to go look at this journal article, this journal article, this journal article, and so on and so on. And it's actually quite a lot of work to bring that together. And when you bring it together and you can summarize it, it actually allows you to use that collective body of knowledge to promote particular sorts of things. And so in psychiatry, for example, there's a branch of medicine called lifestyle medicine and, lifestyle psychiatry. And so we talk about things like sleep, nutrition, purposeful activity, social connections, and a sense of meaning, all of these sorts of things as well too. So all of that body of, medical work that already happens and there is already a lot of support for, it means you can take this particular piece of work and you can slot that into something that clinicians understand and that government bodies understand as a way of actually helping society. And an ounce of prevention is worth tons of a cure, full stop, end of story. And when you can convince governments to invest money up front into preventative sorts of things, from a public health perspective, it pays huge dividends. But again, going back to what I was saying before, if you don't have the evidence to back this sort of stuff up, it makes it really hard to actually convince people to do these sorts of things.
What John said is absolutely right. And, you asked, what evidence has changed or influenced either decision-making or, strategy. And, I think what we found is that no single piece of evidence on its own was enough. It was around what are those supporting pieces of evidence combined with the stories. And our aspiration for that in Invictus Australia was a positioning piece. Was that how can we leverage our global connections through the Invictus family, with our connections with government and defence through our domestic activities and Invictus Games, to I guess amplify those various pieces of evidence which can enhance the story. And I could talk to our engagement with John as a really good example of this. Was that the report which we created and the literature review was a starting point for a conversation with John, who's at the Department of Veteran Affairs. It gave us a starting point. It enables us to shift the conversation in a different way, using multiple pieces of evidence to add weight to the conversation. And that's the really, really important piece is, what is the connected research? It's not just this one study. It's a multitude combined with stories, combined with the lived experience to really try and influence government and defence to make a difference.
John and Neil, thank you, and just been. I mean, what I've sort of picking up from here, and I'm learning. I'm absolutely learning. I learned when we did the pre-call, and I continue, which is great. But I think anecdotal isn't enough. It's really know your audience, but you just use the word, Neil, there, amplify. Know your audience, and actually, there's a bigger community here which can have wider impact. So governments come through loud and clear, and of course government will think about it in a different way, but what we're after is political intent to support our community. But then there's the wider part of it, because we clearly focus on wounded, injured and sick, but there's veterans, there's families, there's benefit to government in doing that. Neil, you mentioned up front getting ahead of upstream costs, benefits and mental health costs. So it's thinking about this in a really wide way and really having this drumbeat of communications with your key audiences and showing that you're adding value, and the research, evidence-based, hard-hitting research, this thing. So that, I think, is a really powerful evolution of where we've come from in Invictus and how we can contribute. So, team, thank you. What a way to finish our conversation in the third panel, and thank you so much. So many good points there, which I think we've sort of just caught the key points we've gone through. I'm now going to hand over to Rob Owen, our CEO, to just sort of conclude the conversation with his thoughts and a few comments. But to you, to Neil, John, Selena, and Nick, thank you so much for your really powerful and different insights, which some of us may not have thought of in contributing to it. And to everyone, thank you very much for joining us. But over now to Rob, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for your masterful stewardship of our flagship conversation. And I suppose I really want to say thank you to all the contributors. It does demonstrate our truly international reach now and actually our real global ambitions. So a thanks particularly to our co-host, Invictus Australia. So proud that you're helping 30,000 veterans and their families. It's incredible to hear. Martin from Invictus Germany, wonderful about the regionalization and the sports festival and people coming from as far afield as South Korea. And Nick, as always, the legacy from Canada continues to live on. I think the bar was set so high in terms of games, and I know that's really helped us with attracting future bidders, future cities wanting to host Invictus Games. In some ways, that's going to be the greatest legacy. The pipeline we have for future games is truly astonishing. That global reach. Today in our office, we're hosting a delegation from Uganda, having done a visit there as well, and discussing their future membership of the Invictus Games and the Invictus community. It really does fit our strategy, which is where the need is great. So none of this would obviously happen without our key supporters, our key funders, and Boeing. A huge thank you for all you've done over the many, many years. I'm particularly sad for us today that Simon O'Brien wasn't able to join, but please pass on our best wishes. But also to ATCO, to Monster, to Better Up, to Brigantes, to Clifford Chance, and to American Airlines for their continued and sustained support for everything we believe in and are trying to achieve. To all of you that are listening live, and for some very early, for some very late, thank you. For those that are joining later with on the YouTube channel, I hope you enjoy the hour and a half of conversations. This is it's a big moment for Invictus Games Foundation that we have this chance to talk like this. Some really great key takeaways. John, particularly the anecdotal evidence, it needs to have proper evidence research behind it. I loved your comment about the fact that an ounce of preservation is worth a ton of cure. So get that. And I suppose to the co-host Invictus Australia, thank you for turning your ideas and your passion into purpose. And Adam, particularly powerful to hear your journey and inspiring others. I think that's what we're all about at Invictus, is that ability to help. Ultimately, we want to inspire millions to help turn their lives around. And thank you everyone for your part in helping us take our next steps as Invictus Games Foundation into our next decade. And we look forward to sharing that journey with you. And thank you everyone for listening. And we hope you have a great rest of your day.